All right, thanks a lot, Dave. So like Dave said, my name is Matt Goldman, and most of my research is on econometric theory, which is just kind of like how economists use statistics to solve interesting problems. And my co-author, Justin Rao, who's not here today, he was also a UCSD grad. He's at Microsoft Research now. He's more interested in behavioral economics. And behavioral economics is all about how sort of human beings and economic actors respond to incentives, and whether or not they do it in sort of a rational or optimum way, or whether or not they do it in the way they expect them to, or if human beings tend to do sort of irrational things, and if they could sort of be better off, if they would behave more like economists kind of thought they should. And so in particular, this particular project, Live by the Three, Die by the Three, the price of risk in the NBA, we're going to sort of merge our two interests, and we're going to use a bunch of play-by-play data from the NBA to investigate how NBA players respond to sort of changing incentives across sort of different states of the game. And when I say a state of the game, I mean like how much they're up by, how much they're down by, how good their team is, how good the team they're playing is, and how much time is left in the game. And basically, those variables are going to change sort of the incentives NBA players face, and we're going to try and look at whether or not they respond to those incentives in the right way. And sort of the key one of those incentives we're going to look at is how NBA players respond to changing incentives over risk in order to determine how many twos they should shoot and how many three-point shots they should shoot. And this is obviously sort of a really interesting decision problem, and it's one that NBA teams have been changing their mind about a lot over the years. So I know if you've been about maybe 20 years ago, I think about 8% of all field goal attempts were three-point shots. And if you look at what's going on today in the NBA, that number is almost tripled. And now it's like 22, 23, 24%. And I'm not going to be able to tell you exactly which one of those ways of playing basketball is optimal, or what would happen if those two styles clashed and we had the dream team of 1992 play the redeemed team of today. But what I can tell you is I can look at how NBA teams play the game of basketball today, and I can look at how their sort of willingness to shoot three-point shots changes across different states of the game, being ahead or being behind, and whether or not those changes kind of make sense if we expect NBA teams to be doing the right thing and trying to win the game. Okay, and so this decision about whether or not to shoot two-point or three-point shots is at the end of the day going to be determined in part by the win value of these shots. And when I talk about the win value of a shot, what I mean is the impact that making a shot and scoring a basket is going to have on your team's probability of winning the game. Okay, and sort of to really pin this down, let me give you guys an example. And I want you to imagine a game state where a team is down 6 points and they have 3 minutes left in the game. Two things that might happen is they might make a three-point shot, and that would then change the game state to a new state where they were down 3 with 3 minutes left, or making a two-point shot would change the game state to being down 4 with 3 minutes remaining. Okay, and so what I'm going to sort of do is I'm going to take a big slop of data, 6 years of play-by-play data to be specific, and I'm going to look at how often teams actually end up winning the game with 3 minutes left when they're down by 6, down by 4, down by 3, and I'm going to compare those numbers. And I'm going to see, for example, maybe making the three-point shot improves my chance to win by 5%. Then that's the win value of that three-point shot. And maybe making a two-point shot only improves my chance to win the game by 3%. And that's the win value of the two-point shot. So that's what I mean when I say win value. And that's sort of the true or the real value that a team who wants to win the game should really care about when they're selecting their shots. And for comparison, we can just think about the point value of a shot. The point value, or sort of the nominal or the fake value, which is just the number of points. And obviously, a three-point shot is always 3 points. A two-point shot is 2 points. And the ratio of the nominal value of a 3 to a 2 is always just 1.5. That's just simple division. Okay, no funny business there. But what we care more about is the win value. And that number, the ratio of the win value of a 3 to a 2, which we're going to call alpha throughout the presentation, that's not always going to be 1.5. That's going to be around 1.5. But that's going to change a lot depending on whether or not you're ahead or behind. And in particular, if you look at this picture, which shows the first 3 quarters of the game, across the axis coming towards you is the amount of time left in the game, and going left to right is the current score differential in the game. We see that this number actually changes a little bit over the first 3 quarters. In particular, if you look sort of at the beginning of the game, that's a situation where there's still 48 minutes left. And I have no idea what's going to happen over the next 48 minutes, who's going to win. I have no idea if I should sort of be risk-averse or risk-loving. And so the value of alpha stays pretty close to sort of the nominal or point values of the 3- and 2-point shots, and that ratio stays close to 1.5. Similarly, if I look down the middle of this picture in a situation where the game is actually tied, that's a situation where, again, I'm not really risk-averse or risk-neutral. I actually sort of want to get as many points as possible and try to separate myself from the other team. And that's, again, a risk-neutral situation. All I care about is the point value of the 3- and 2-point shots, and so the ratio of their win values stays constant at 1.5. However, if we get in a situation where the clock starts to tick down and there's only 12 minutes left, and we're maybe up 10, we're sort of really happy with how the game's going. We're feeling pretty conservative. We want to keep the score where it's at. And so as a result, we don't want to take too many risky three-point shots. we would rather, and so the actual win value of a 3 becomes a lot less than 1.5 times the win value of a 2 and can get as low as 1.45 or 1.4. Similarly, 12 minutes left, we're down 10. That number can get as high as 1.55 or 1.6 as we start to get desperate and really value the ability to get 3 points all at once in a lump sum. Okay? And then similarly, we go to the fourth quarter, and really it's the same picture, but because there's so little time left, the value of sort of these incentives over risk become a lot more important. And that's why the scale is now a lot sort of broader and goes as far as 1.2 or 1.8. And you can see similarly when we're way ahead, 3s become very relatively invaluable, only a little bit more valuable than a 2. And if we're way behind at the end of a close game, down 6 with a minute left, then the win value of a 3 actually becomes a lot more than the win value of a 2, as much as 1.8 times the win value of a 2. Okay? So now we have this incredibly relevant sort of payoff parameter alpha, which gives us a really good idea of how NBA teams' incentives are changing as they try to win the game from possession to possession as the score changes and the time remaining changes. And a really good question is, for this fixed value of alpha on one particular possession, how do we expect an NBA team to go about deciding how many 3-point and how many 2-point shots it's actually going to take? And so to sort of get an idea of what's going on there, we're going to put together this sort of really simple kind of toy model of what an offensive team is doing on a possession. And this is not what's actually going on, but we think this is kind of a cool toy. And the basic idea is that an offensive team is moving along the bottom axis here, choosing a fraction of 3-point shots that they're going to take on a given possession, sort of a probability of taking a 3. Okay? And as they sort of increase that probability of taking a 3, then what's going to happen is their efficiency on 3-point shots, which you can think of as that black line coming out of the right side of the graph, is going to go down. Because if they really want to be certain they're going to take a 3-point shot, then in order to do that, they actually have to accept some pretty crappy 3-point opportunities. Okay, so if I take very few 3s, maybe all my 3s will be situations where I'm wide open and Ray Allen's wide open in the corner. And so my efficiency on 3s, if I take very few 3s, will be higher. If I want to take more and more 3s, I'll have to accept lower quality shots on the margin. I can't just get Ray Allen open in the corner. I've got to have LeBron shoot some pull-up jumpers with a hand in his face. Okay? So basically, these are called usage curves. On the right side, there's a usage curve for the 3-pointers that's downward sloping. On the left side, there's a usage curve for the 2-pointers, which is downward sloping. For any particular U3 I pick on the bottom, I can go up to the 2-point line and the 3-point line, and that's going to tell me my average efficiency on 2- and 3-point shots. And similarly, you can look at the orange line as being what an economist might call the marginal efficiencies on 2- and 3-point shots. And sort of what that might mean is if I want to take U3, say that's like 0.2 or 0.3, a 30% chance of taking a 3-point shot, I've got to be willing to accept a certain low-quality 3-point shot. Right, so the orange line is like the lowest quality 3-point shot I have to be willing to accept in order to take U3 3-point shots. And what a basketball team is going to do is they're going to set the win value of the lowest quality 3-point shot that they're willing to shoot equal to the win value of the lowest quality 2-point shot they're willing to shoot. And that's going to happen at point A where those two orange lines intersect. Okay, so U3 is going to be at that blue line where the two orange lines intersect. And if we take that up to B and C, that's going to tell us B is going to give us the efficiency of 2-pointers, and C is going to give us the efficiency in terms of nominal point return of 3-pointers. Okay? So the nice thing about this picture is hopefully it's intuitive, it makes sense, you believe that this is a little bit like what basketball teams should actually do, if obviously what they do is a lot more complicated. And also it kind of matches some important empirical facts about basketball. And one of those facts is that 3-pointers are shot a lot less often than 2s, and you can see that U3 in this picture is less than 50%. And the other one is that even though 3-pointers are shot less often, they actually end up being more efficient on average shots. 3-pointers on average get you something like 1.25 points per shot, as compared to, like, I think 1.15 points per shot for 2s. I don't have the exact numbers, but it's something like that. There's definitely what I call an efficiency premium for 3-point shots. And you can think of that premium as the distance between C and B, and that's going to be something we're going to be really interested in observing how that premium changes across states of the game. Okay? And so quickly, this seems a little bit paradoxical. Why are 3-point shots so much better on average, and yet NBA teams take so many more 2s than 3s? Well, I think the answer is pretty simple. The answer is that there are some really easy inframarginal or easy 3-point shots where someone is just wide open. And those are some of the best shots in the game. And as a result, the average efficiency of 3-point shots is dragged up a lot by those easy shots. But that marginal sort of contested 3s, if I want to shoot more 3s on the margin, those can actually be very difficult. And the way you see that here is that in these usage curves, the 3-point usage curve starts higher and then slopes downward more quickly. Okay? And that's sort of what's giving us the result we have, where there's this efficiency premium for 3s, but we shoot a lot less of them. Okay? Hopefully that makes some sense. And so as a result, there's nothing about this picture that says that basketball teams are doing anything wrong. In order to start to assess the optimality of a basketball team's behavior, we're going to look at what a basketball team does when we move across the game state and actually change the value of alpha. Okay? And so the way I'm going to model changing the value of alpha is I'm going to imagine we take this picture and then we just shift the value of three-pointers up. Keep the sort of the market or the curves for the two-point side exactly the same. And what happens if I just shift the value of three-pointers up, both the usage curve and the marginal shot curve? And so now what happens is the team does the exact same calculation. They set the two orange lines equal to each other, the new dashed orange line with the old two-point orange line, and they decide to shoot A prime three-pointers. So they shoot a lot more three-pointers than they did before. And then we take A prime up to our two usage curves, and we see that now the efficiency premium is the distance between C prime and B prime. So what happened? We started losing, we got desperate, we decided we really liked variance, and so we shot more three-pointers because we were desperate to get back into the game, and our efficiency premium on threes went down because we were settling for lower and lower quality three-point shots in the margin. So this is what we would expect a basketball team to do as they get more desperate. This is all just pure theory at this point, okay? And so one last caveat about that first prediction is right now in this model, the defense isn't doing anything. They're there in the background. They're the reason the offense doesn't score every time, but they're not allowed to change their policy as alpha changes. And what you might imagine is that as alpha gets high and the offense gets desperate because they're losing, the defense is going to get conservative. The defense is going to get the opposite of desperate, and they're going to want to close out even harder on three-point shots. Okay? And so maybe if the defense is really powerful and very effective at closing out, maybe what will actually end up happening is when the offense gets desperate and alpha goes up, the defense will really clamp down and the offense won't be able to shoot more three-point shots. Okay? So when we talk about that first prediction, that the offense will shoot, the second prediction, that the offense will shoot more three-pointers when alpha goes up, we're not that confident in it. But the first prediction about the efficiency premium should definitely decrease. We're very confident in it. Because when the offense is more desperate to shoot threes and the defense is more desperate to stop them, we can be very confident the efficiency premium for three-point shots is going to decrease. Okay? So those are our two predictions. And so quickly we're going to look at some data and we're going to test them and see if they actually hold up for NBA teams. Now one thing to be very careful about as I test these predictions is that everything I've done has been sort of assuming that the game of basketball wasn't changing when alpha was changing. We're holding everything else constant. We're assuming the offense's ability and the defense's ability is not changing. So in doing this analysis, it was very important that we used what I'm going to call lineup fixed effects. And so what that means, that's a complicated term, but basically it means we're holding the 5 guys on offense and the 5 guys on defense constant, and we're just looking at differences in the probability of shooting a three-point shot in this case as the value of alpha changes with the score differential. And basically what you see, alpha is 1.5. As you can remember, that's a situation when teams are risk neutral because it's a close game. That's the situation where teams, holding everything else constant, shoot the smallest fraction of three-point shots. Okay, and that's not what we predicted at all. What we predicted is that across the board, as alpha went that way, as teams got more desperate because alpha was going that way, these guys were just going to shoot more three-point shots. So we expected a line that sloped up and to the right. But we did not get that. Instead, we got this funny shape where trailing teams, once teams are losing, the line slopes up and to the right. So as trailing teams start to lose by more and more, they get more and more desperate. But leading teams, as their lead shrinks, they don't get more desperate, they don't get more risk neutral, they actually kind of tighten up and go away from the three-point shot, even though we think they should probably be increasing their fraction of three-point shots. So this is kind of perverse behavior by the team that's ahead, and it's a little weird. Okay? Now quickly, like I said, this was our prediction about usage, the probability of shooting a three-point shot. If we thought the defense had a really strong sort of effectiveness at changing the way the game of basketball was played, we weren't so confident in this theoretical prediction. We also wanted to look at the efficiency premium between 3- and 2-point shots. Okay? So in particular, this picture right here shows how that efficiency premium, again, holding the offensive and the defensive lineup constant, changes as the value of alpha changes. And so going to the right, we have a situation where the offensive team is further and further behind. And again, what we see is this efficiency premium is largest in close games. So in close games, offenses seem least willing to shoot threes, and they get the highest sort of efficiency premium for those threes. Okay? What we predicted is that as teams got more desperate, this efficiency premium would sort of shrink monotonically in a downward direction. So we expected this line to go down to the right. And once again, for the trailing team, that's exactly what happens. As they get more desperate, they're more willing to settle for three-point shots, and their efficiency premium on threes goes down. But the leading team, again, is showing this perverse behavior, which is consistent with the last picture, where they are tightening up and not shooting as many threes as the game gets closer. Okay? So this is this really interesting sort of asymmetric response to risk, where the trailing team, as they get more desperate, takes more threes, and those threes have a lower average point value or efficiency premium relative to two-point shots. But the leading team does the exact opposite, and as the game gets closer and they become more risk neutral as opposed to the very conservative state they were in before, they shoot fewer threes than they were when they had a big lead, and those threes have a higher efficiency premium over two-point shots. Okay? All right, so basically what this means, the trailing team seems to respect our theoretical notions of the price of risk, whereas the leading team is doing the exact opposite. They tighten up when their lead is shrinking. They stop playing their game. Who knows psychologically exactly what they're doing, but they seem to invert the price of risk. And psychologically, exactly what's going on here, I think that's hard to speculate. Justin, being the behavioral economist, might tell you some cool stuff about that tomorrow. But I just sort of look at it as what these guys look at this picture, and what they're saying is, when can I take threes? I can take threes because when I'm way behind because I know I have to, and I can take threes when I'm way ahead because I can afford to. And I think maybe that's the state of mind they have, but it's not necessarily one that really accords with our sort of theoretical standards of what teams should do if they just want to maximize their chance to win the game. All right, so that's sort of the end of that particular result, but while we were looking into this, we also got very interested in how leading and trailing teams perform differently, just sort of across the board. It's sort of a level effect. We thought, if trailing teams have this or leading teams have this sort of psychological issue and they perform differently and they don't respond to risk optimally, maybe they do other things wrong. And so instead of looking at the efficiency premium, we actually just looked at the level of overall offensive efficiency for leading and trailing teams. And what we actually found was like a really sort of staggering and surprising result that we really had not set out to look for in the first place. And that is basically that trailing teams get way better at basketball. So the same 5 guys on offense playing the same 5 guys on defense are way, way better at basketball when they're losing. And so taking a value of alpha, which was 1.6, which is a situation where you're risk-loving because you're behind, but it's fairly common in the fourth quarter, we estimated in that kind of a situation, offensive efficiencies on both 2- and 3-point shots went up by about 0.07 points per possession. And then additionally, the leading team became a lot more likely to get offensive rebounds the trailing team became a lot more likely to get offensive rebounds. Combining those two things together, we actually saw about a 10% increase in offensive efficiency when the value of alpha is high. And so we look at this and we say, maybe winning is making us complacent, maybe losing is really motivating us, but there's something about being behind that just gets us fired up and gets us to play better basketball. Okay? And I think when we sort of looked, on a player-by-player basis on exactly what was causing this effect, one big thing we saw is that star players, really good offensive options, would just take way more shots for their team when their team was losing. And so one example of that is Kobe Bryant. I think Kobe hates losing. This should not come as a surprise to anybody. And so this picture right here just sort of shows the fraction of the Lakers' shots that Kobe takes when he's on the court, and this is aggregated over 4 or 5 different seasons. And basically what you see is Kobe shoots a lot. In most states of the game, he takes about 32% of the Lakers' shots. But when the game starts to slip away, if the Lakers are down 5 in a close game, Kobe shoots like 40% of the time, 41% of the time. So I think maybe you guys have all seen this really cool stat on ESPN or something like that the Lakers are like 2-20 when Kobe takes 20 shots. The Lakers aren't losing because Kobe's shooting. Kobe's getting mad and shooting because the Lakers are losing. And I think the obvious question is, why does Kobe do that when he's down 5, but not when he's up 5? Because you can sort of think down 5 and up 5, those are kind of symmetric situations. Those are situations where the game could still swing either way, and the value of Kobe's effort to the Lakers' sort of bottom line in terms of their ability to win the game is kind of the same. And if I was the GM or the coach of the Lakers, I would say, hey, Kobe, this picture should kind of be symmetric around 0. I want you to try hard when the game is close, not just when we're losing, right? And this is not just to pick on Kobe, because I think throughout the NBA, it was everybody who was getting rebounds. It's LeBron, it's Dirk, all these guys, they play harder, they shoot more when they're losing, they go to the basket more when they're losing. And it's not obviously an optimal thing for these guys to be allocating their effort in exactly this way. All right, so anyway, these things in combination, losing teams are way better at basketball. Leading teams get complacent and also don't really understand their incentives over risk and kind of tighten up. These things in combination mean that comebacks happen all the time in basketball, right? And so you hear from casual fans all the time, oh, I don't need to watch the first 3 quarters, I'll just watch the last 5 minutes of the game and that's going to decide it anyway. And as a stats guy, I always hated that. Basketball is a game of math, 2 points is 2 points, you should watch the whole game, every point counts. But really, if you take these results seriously, it's telling you that 2 points is not 2 points. 2 points in the beginning of the game is worth a lot less than 2 points because the other team's going to get fired up and you're probably going to give some of those 2 points back. And there's all these this rubber band effect. I don't know if you guys ever played NBA Jam when you were a kid, but like the first half didn't matter, right? Whatever happened in the first half, there was this rubber band effect, and the game was going to be close at the end of the game. And it's not that strong in the NBA. Obviously, a lot of games are never close. But I think if you thought of basketball as a series of independent possessions that had nothing to do with each other, you would be really, really surprised by how many games ended up being decided in the last few minutes. And so because of that, we decided to look really quickly into which kinds of teams were able to up their game in the clutch moments. And so real quickly, I don't have a whole lot of time to explain how I made this graph, but basically what we're looking at here is baseline offensive efficiency of the 180 team seasons in our sample, and how those baseline offensive efficiencies compared to the improvement we saw in a clutch situation. We didn't actually come up with a definition of clutch. This is based on a continuous metric of clutchness that we ran a regression and did some other stuff I can talk about, but the basic idea is that the vast majority of teams see a decrease in their offensive performance in the clutch. Most of these dots are below 0. But the elite teams, almost all of them, are able to rev their engine and actually get a little bit better in the clutch, whereas the worst teams, almost all of them, get worse. And the t-statistic on this line, it has a positive slope of like 7, so there's like no chance this is just random noise. It's very clear that like better teams get way more better than bad teams in the clutch. And the same thing goes for defense, where now negative values of defensive efficiency or lower values are good. Good defenses can rev their engine in the clutch and really shut you down in a way that bad defenses who actually get worse and get scored on more in the clutch are not able to do that. And this is sort of another way in which, just like losing seemed to motivate effort, it also looks like high leverage situations motivate effort, and better teams on offense and on defense are just able to rev their engine a little bit more and step up to the plate. These things in combination basically just mean clutch moments happen a lot. Good teams play better in the clutch. So good teams are able to sort of win a lot more games than we thought they would. In particular, teams that are able to come through in these clutch moments win a lot more games than you otherwise might think they would. So just quickly to sum up where we've been. So we started out by putting together a model of the risk preferences that a team should have if all it cared about was winning the game, and how those risk preferences would sort of vary across the state of the game. And then we looked at whether or not teams seem to adhere to our standards of optimality. Teams who are losing do a great job of doing exactly what we think they should. They respect the price of risk. Leading teams don't really seem to do that. They seem to have this perverse sort of tightening up behavior in close games. That was very surprising. Additionally to that, we found that losing motivated effort and led to much better performance in terms of getting to the basket, getting offensive rebounds, and in general scoring efficiently. These factors in combination lead to a lot more close games than you would think there would be if you didn't believe in these factors and you thought basketball was just a bunch of independent possessions. And so as a result, good teams up their performance in the clutch and then just win way more games than you might think they would otherwise. All right, that's all I got. Justin will definitely be here giving the same talk tomorrow. And Justin is huge on Twitter, so you should follow him. All right.
Can I get? So we do have time for questions. If anyone wants to ask any, you can come to the middle. So I'll be right here and you can come.
Seems like a pattern. Again, I really like the paper. I was reading it beforehand. One question, it does seem to be clear. What you're stating is there's 2 points of inflection. You expect to have a rational decision curve like that for 3 points, where they take more 3 points when they're trailing, less when they're ahead because of the risk factors involved. But you're saying that there seems to be an inflection point around whether or not you're ahead or behind in that particular point, and also in terms of time, correct? So you're saying that having less time is affecting the decision point, but also being ahead or behind is affecting that decision point.
So we're only really presenting what's happening with respect to alpha, which is sort of this composite of both how much time is left in the game and the score. So basically, this is like the desperation index, right?
Right.
Right, and so basically, at any particular time in the game, as I start to, at any particular time in the game, I see the diffuse.
Right, so you're saying that there's an inflection point right around where the 1.5, that would be the leading or trailing point. Now, did you consider, and one thing that was screaming out at me when I was looking at the paper, did you consider the differentiating out between the types of 3 points attempts and the types of 2 points attempts that are being taken?
Yeah, can I get the other hand mic?
Like, corner threes, above the key threes, 15-foot jumpers, and that kind of like the shot analysis, or just shot location.
Okay, that's fine.
I'm going to go plug it back in.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Just a question about your findings on clutch work, especially for good teams versus bad teams. How much of that do you think is, how optimal do you think that behavior is? Do you think that players are sort of consciously sort of revving up their, choosing to go easy when the game is less close so they can save up their energy for those big moments and therefore it's optimal use of their limited endurance resources? Or do you think that this is some psychological element out of their control that they should be coached to play differently?
So I definitely think a lot of it is a psychological aspect. I don't think these guys are intentionally lowering their effort when they're winning. I mean, I can't say for sure, I'm not in these guys' heads, but I just think that there's like a level of being fired up that just happens when you're getting embarrassed, or happens when you know that everything is on the line, that you just can't replicate because you want to. And that I think that maybe the interesting dimension is looking at how, you know, a coach or an organization can start convincing their players when they're up 3 or 4 points that they should be pissed off and desperate and they should play like they're down 3 or 4 points. Because I don't think these guys are choosing to play suboptimally. I think that there's something intrinsic or sort of animal that gets activated when they're getting beat.
Given that players do get tired, clearly they should. Sorry. Given that players do get tired, they shouldn't give the exact same effort at every point in the game.
No, absolutely not. So just to quickly, I think the Kobe picture does the best job of illustrating this, and that what I would sort of expect is they would give their highest effort in sort of a symmetric way, whether they were winning or losing. Up 2 or down 2, they should try really hard. But instead, we don't see something so symmetric. We see something where they try really hard when they're losing. So instead of just trying to maximize their chance to win the game, they've got this interesting loss-averse behavior. There we go.
So I guess you saw that more efficient teams get even more efficient. Across those teams, was there something else that determined their change in efficiency? So was it experience, was it star players, or something like that? Did you have time to cut the data?
That's a very good question. So what exactly predicted those efficiency bumps for the offense and the defense? That's something to look into. So that was something sort of right before we came out here, we said we should put something up here about what kind of teams get better. I think that's a great next question for us to go back and look at. Yeah.
So you showed this curve here, this one right here that I'm interested in. Is the actual like a percentage makes rising for teams that are in the lead? So for example, are they actually getting better shots? Because we know that you can make 2-point shots closer to the basket at a much higher efficiency than you can farther away from the basket. And so, you know, this would lead me to believe that they're actually getting a better shot, that they're working harder to get a better shot, you know, because they're so close to the lead instead of taking a more risk-adverse shot. Does that make sense?
So in a close game, they're shooting fewer 3-point shots, right?
Yeah.
So, and you're saying that means they're shooting more shots close to the basket, right?
Yeah.
So so in general, 3-point shots are great shots.
Yeah.
They're often a result of working really hard and forcing the other team to double, and then you get an open look from the 3-point line. So I don't necessarily think that shooting fewer 3 shots is a sign of, I don't know. That's something to think about.
All right, so please give a hand for our speaker.